Warfare has been an unfortunate yet ever-present aspect of human history. Throughout the ages, nations and tribes have clashed for various reasons, from territorial disputes to ideological differences. As a result, military tactics and weapons have evolved to become more effective and, at times, more terrifying. Among the many innovations of warfare, traps have played a significant role in instilling fear in adversaries and gaining the upper hand on the battlefield. These traps, designed to maim, kill, or incapacitate enemy combatants, showcase the darker side of human ingenuity. This essay delves into the top 10 most terrifying traps used. Punji stake trap, a simple yet effective and terrifying weapon, has its origins in Southeast Asia. The trap became well known during the Vietnam War, where it was used by the Viet Cong as a guerrilla warfare tactic against the invading American forces. However, its use predates this conflict, with evidence of its deployment in various guerrilla-style engagements throughout history. The design of the Punji stake trap is relatively straightforward, which is perhaps why it has been such a popular choice among guerrilla fighters. The trap consists of sharpened stakes or sticks, often made from bamboo, that have been hardened by fire or treated with a poisonous substance. These stakes are then carefully concealed in pits or holes, camouflaged with leaves, branches, or other natural materials. The idea behind this trap is that when an unsuspecting enemy soldier steps on or into the concealed pit, they become impaled by the sharp stakes, causing severe injury or death. While the physical damage caused by the Punji stake trap is undeniably brutal, the psychological impact of these traps on enemy troops is perhaps even more significant. The traps were often placed in areas where soldiers were likely to walk, such as paths or clearings, making it difficult for the enemy to navigate through the jungle without fear of encountering these hidden dangers. The stakes were also typically placed at angles, increasing the likelihood that the victim would be impaled through the foot or leg and unable to pull themselves free without causing further injury. One particularly gruesome aspect of the Punji stake trap is the use of poison or fecal matter to coat the stakes. This addition was meant to cause infection in the event that the stakes did not cause immediate death. Soldiers who were injured by Punji stakes faced not only the agony of the initial wound, but also the potential for sepsis and other complications due to the toxins introduced into their bodies. The effectiveness of the Punji stake trap was not only due to its ability to cause physical harm, but also its capacity to instill fear and paranoia among enemy forces. As a result, these traps were a powerful psychological weapon that contributed to the demoralization and anxiety experienced by soldiers in combat. Soldiers were constantly on edge, knowing that a misstep could lead to a gruesome end. This heightened level of stress and fear could lead to decreased morale and effectiveness among troops, playing into the hands of the guerrilla forces that employed these traps. The Punji stake trap is a prime example of a simple yet highly effective and terrifying weapon used in warfare. Though low-tech in nature, these traps had a significant impact on both the physical and psychological well-being of enemy combatants, showcasing the importance of fear as a weapon in war. The Punji stake trap serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the simplest of devices can be the most devastating in times of conflict. Landmines are perhaps one of the most infamous and enduringly terrifying weapons of war. Developed as early as World War I, these explosive devices were designed to be concealed in the ground, detonating when triggered by the weight or proximity of an enemy combatant or vehicle. Landmines have been used extensively in numerous conflicts since their inception, including World War II, the Korean War, and the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East and Africa. The primary purpose of landmines is to maim, kill, or immobilize enemy forces, often with a focus on disrupting supply lines and impeding the advance of enemy troops. However, the terror they instill in both military personnel and civilians is a significant secondary effect that cannot be understated. Landmines are indiscriminate by nature, and once they are buried in the ground, they pose a threat to anyone who unknowingly steps on or near them, including civilians, and even the very soldiers who initially placed them. There are two main types of landmines: anti-personnel and anti-tank mines. Anti-personnel mines are designed to target individual soldiers, often causing severe injuries such as amputations, shrapnel wounds, or death. Anti-tank mines, on the other hand, are intended to immobilize or destroy vehicles such as tanks and armored personnel carriers. Both types of mines have contributed to the lasting legacy of fear that surrounds these devices. One of the most terrifying aspects of landmines is their ability to remain active long after a conflict has ended. In many war-torn regions, unexploded mines continue to pose a lethal threat to civilians, often resulting in accidental detonations that cause death or severe injury. Efforts to locate and remove these hidden dangers are costly, time-consuming, and fraught with risk, making it difficult for affected regions to recover from the impact of war. Landmines also have a psychological effect on soldiers who must navigate through minefields or areas suspected to be contaminated with these hidden explosives. The knowledge that a single misstep could result in a devastating injury or death can severely impact the morale and effectiveness of troops, leading to increased stress and anxiety during combat operations. This mental strain can have lasting effects on the mental health of military personnel, even after they have returned home from active duty. In essence, landmines are a chilling reminder of the lengths humans have gone to in their pursuit of victory in war. These devices not only cause physical harm, but also create a lasting psychological impact on those who must live with the constant threat of their presence. The use of landmines has left a dark and enduring legacy on the landscape of warfare, a testament to the terrifying power of hidden and indiscriminate destruction. Caltrops are another example of a simple yet effective trap used in warfare throughout history. These small, four-pointed devices are designed so that one point always faces upward, regardless of how they land. When scattered on the ground, they create an impassable barrier for enemy infantry, cavalry, and even wheeled vehicles. Caltrops have been used by various civilizations, including the ancient Romans, medieval Europeans, and even Japanese samurai. The primary purpose of caltrops is to impede the movement of enemy forces, causing injury to foot soldiers or horses and puncturing the tires of vehicles. The sharp points can easily penetrate footwear, inflicting severe pain and potentially disabling those who step on them. The psychological impact of caltrops is also significant, as they can create a sense of vulnerability and apprehension among enemy troops who must carefully navigate through areas littered with these hidden dangers. Caltrops have been utilized in both defensive and offensive operations. Defensively, they can be scattered around key positions to protect against enemy advances, or to create a barrier that funnel enemy forces into areas where they can be more easily targeted. Offensively, they can be used to disrupt enemy supply lines, create chaos and confusion, and force enemy troops to divert their course or abandon their vehicles. Tripwire booby traps are another terrifying weapon of war, designed to catch enemy soldiers off guard and cause injury or death with little to no warning. These traps can be fashioned using a variety of mechanisms, such as explosives, firearms, or even makeshift devices, all of which are triggered when an unsuspecting victim trips the wire. One common type of tripwire booby trap is the grenade trap, in which a live grenade is rigged to a tripwire and concealed in a location where enemy soldiers are likely to pass. When the wire is tripped, the grenade's pin is pulled, causing it to detonate and inflict severe damage on those nearby. Other variations of tripwire traps include the use of shotguns, crossbows, or even homemade devices that release a barrage of projectiles, such as nails or glass shards. Like other traps used in warfare, tripwire booby traps have a significant psychological impact on enemy troops. The fear of encountering these hidden dangers can lead to increased stress and anxiety, reducing morale and effectiveness in combat. Soldiers must remain constantly vigilant, knowing that even the slightest misstep could trigger a deadly trap. Both caltrops and tripwire booby traps showcase the ingenuity and resourcefulness of humans in their quest for victory in war. These simple yet effective traps have left a lasting impression on the battlefield, striking fear into the hearts of enemy combatants and illustrating the power of psychological warfare. Trench warfare was a dominant feature of World War I, with both sides digging elaborate networks of trenches to protect themselves from enemy fire. and gain strategic advantage. Within these trenches, soldiers developed a variety of traps to further secure their positions and inflict harm on enemy forces attempting to infiltrate their defenses. One such example is the trench trap, which was designed to cause injury or death to those who unwittingly fell into them. Trench traps varied in design and complexity, but they all shared the same basic premise. A concealed hole or pit, often lined with sharpened stakes, broken glass, or other dangerous materials, was dug into the bottom of the trench or the surrounding area. Enemy soldiers attempting to navigate the trenches in the darkness or under fire would be at risk of falling into these hidden pits, suffering severe injury or death as a result. The psychological impact of trench traps on soldiers was significant, as the constant threat of encountering these hidden dangers added to the already high levels of stress and anxiety experienced in trench warfare. The fear of falling into a trench trap not only made soldiers more cautious and slow-moving, but also served to undermine their morale and overall effectiveness in combat. Flamethrower traps, another terrifying weapon of war, were designed to engulf enemy soldiers in a deadly inferno. These traps were often triggered by tripwires or pressure plates and utilized a variety of fuel sources, such as gasoline, napalm, or other flammable substances, to create an intense and fast-spreading fire. One notable example of a flamethrower trap was used by the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War. The trap consisted of a hidden fuel container connected to a tripwire or pressure plate. When triggered, the fuel was ignited, releasing a deadly torrent of flame that engulfed the unfortunate victim. These traps were often placed in tunnels or along paths frequented by enemy troops, making them difficult to detect and avoid. The psychological impact of flamethrower traps on enemy soldiers was profound. The fear of being burned alive is primal and deeply ingrained in the human psyche, and the knowledge that such a horrific fate could befall them at any moment undoubtedly contributed to the demoralization and anxiety experienced by soldiers facing these hidden dangers. Both trench traps and flamethrower traps exemplify the darker side of human ingenuity in warfare. These traps not only caused physical harm, but also served to instill fear and terror in the minds of enemy combatants, showcasing the importance of psychological warfare in the broader context of armed conflict. Explosive anti-tank dogs were a desperate and unsettling weapon used by the Soviet Union during World War II. The concept behind this tactic was to train dogs to associate the underside of tanks with food and then to strap explosives to the animals before sending them toward enemy tanks. The explosives were typically rigged with a lever or other trigger mechanism that would detonate the charge upon contact with the tank, resulting in the destruction of the vehicle and, tragically, the death of the dog. The use of explosive anti-tank dogs was not only controversial from an ethical standpoint, but also had a significant psychological impact on both sides of the conflict. For the Soviet soldiers tasked with training and deploying these canine weapons, the knowledge that they were sending loyal and innocent animals to their deaths undoubtedly weighed heavily on their conscience. Meanwhile, for the enemy tank crews, the fear of facing such an unconventional and unpredictable weapon would have added to the already considerable stress and anxiety of combat. Despite the horrifying nature of this tactic, the effectiveness of explosive anti-tank dogs was limited. Many of the dogs became disoriented or frightened by the noise and chaos of the battlefield, leading them to flee or seek cover rather than complete their mission. In some cases, the dogs even returned to their own lines, posing a risk to the very soldiers who had deployed them. The Carcano trap, used by Italian partisans during World War II, was another ingenious yet terrifying weapon of war. Named after the Carcano rifle, a popular firearm among Italian troops at the time, this trap involved rigging a rifle with a tripwire or pressure plate trigger mechanism. When an enemy soldier tripped the wire or stepped on the plate, the rifle would discharge, firing a bullet directly at the unsuspecting victim. These traps were often placed in strategic locations, such as doorways, along paths, or in other areas where enemy troops were likely to pass. The Carcano trap was not only designed to cause injury or death, but also to create fear and uncertainty among enemy forces. The knowledge that a lethal trap could be hidden in any location forced soldiers to proceed with extreme caution, potentially slowing their advance and undermining their morale. In conclusion, the use of explosive anti-tank dogs and Carcano traps highlights the lengths to which humans have gone in their pursuit of victory in war. These devices not only caused physical harm, but also served to instill fear and terror in the minds of enemy combatants, illustrating the power of psychological warfare and the darker side of human ingenuity. The deployment of explosive anti-tank dogs during World War II was a chilling example of the extreme measures taken in an effort to gain an advantage in warfare. These dogs were trained by Soviet forces to seek out enemy tanks, associating the scent of fuel with food. Once trained, the dogs were fitted with explosive devices and released onto the battlefield, with the intention that they would approach enemy tanks and trigger the explosives upon contact, destroying the vehicle in the process. Using animals in such a capacity was undoubtedly morally questionable, and it had a significant psychological impact on all parties involved. For Soviet soldiers who trained the dogs, the knowledge that they were sending these loyal animals to their demise must have been a heavy burden. For enemy tank crews, the fear of encountering such an unpredictable weapon would have only added to the already considerable stress of combat. Despite the cruel nature of this tactic, the effectiveness of explosive anti-tank dogs was limited. Many dogs became disoriented or frightened by the noise and chaos of the battlefield, ultimately failing to complete their missions. In some cases, the dogs even retreated to their own lines, causing harm to the soldiers who had deployed them. The Carcano trap, another inventive but terrifying weapon, was employed by Italian partisans during World War II. The trap was named after the Carcano rifle, a common firearm among Italian troops. To create the trap, a rifle was rigged with a tripwire or pressure plate trigger mechanism. When an enemy soldier triggered the trap, the rifle would discharge a bullet directly at the victim. Carcano traps were often placed in strategic locations, such as doorways, along paths, or in other areas where enemy troops were likely to pass. The purpose of the Carcano trap was not only to inflict injury or death, but also to create fear and uncertainty among enemy forces. The knowledge that a lethal trap could be hidden in any location forced soldiers to proceed with extreme caution, potentially slowing their advance and undermining their morale. Carcano traps, utilized by Italian partisans during World War II, showcased human ingenuity in the creation of lethal devices meant to inflict harm and terror upon enemy forces. These traps were named after the Carcano rifle, a common firearm among Italian troops of the era. To create a Carcano trap, a rifle was rigged with a tripwire or pressure plate, creating a trigger mechanism that would discharge a bullet directly at the enemy soldier who unknowingly activated the device. Carcano traps were often cleverly concealed, placed in strategic locations where enemy troops were likely to pass. Doorways, paths, and narrow passages were favored spots as they provided a higher likelihood of ensnaring unsuspecting soldiers. The very existence of these traps added a constant layer of anxiety and fear to the lives of enemy combatants, who were forced to move with caution and vigilance in areas where Carcano traps were suspected. These traps also had the potential to inflict substantial damage on enemy forces, as a well-placed and carefully concealed Carcano trap could eliminate multiple soldiers in quick succession. The element of surprise afforded by these traps was invaluable, catching enemy troops off guard and creating moments of chaos and disorientation that could be exploited by partisan forces. Furthermore, Carcano traps had a far-reaching psychological impact on enemy forces, as the fear of encountering such a deadly device persisted long after a soldier had left the area where the traps were known to be deployed. This lingering fear could lead to heightened stress levels and a general sense of unease, which could contribute to a decline in overall combat effectiveness. The use of Carcano traps also served as a form of psychological warfare, in that the mere threat of encountering these lethal devices would be enough to spread fear and apprehension among enemy forces. As word spread of the deadly traps and their potential consequences, the traps would become more effective as a deterrent, even if only a relatively small number were actually deployed. The Carcano trap, is a prime example of the darker side of human ingenuity in warfare. These devices not only caused physical harm to enemy combatants, but also wielded a considerable psychological impact, forcing soldiers to constantly be on guard and undermining their morale and effectiveness in battle. The use of such cunning and deadly traps is a stark reminder of the lengths to which humans have gone to gain an advantage in the theater of war. The use of explosive anti-tank dogs and Carcano traps demonstrates the extent to which humans have pushed the boundaries of warfare in an effort to gain the upper hand. These devices not only caused physical harm, but also served to instill fear and terror in the minds of enemy combatants, illustrating the power of psychological warfare and the darker side of human ingenuity. The bamboo torture trap, often associated with Japanese forces during World War II, was a particularly cruel and gruesome method of inflicting pain and terror on enemy combatants. The trap was based on the principle that bamboo, a rapidly growing plant, could be used to create a slow and agonizing form of torture. Captured prisoners would be tied above a young bamboo shoot and left to endure the excruciating pain as the shoot grew and pierced their bodies over time. This method of torture was not only physically unbearable, but also had a profound psychological impact on the victims and their comrades. The knowledge that a fellow soldier was being subjected to such a horrific fate would undoubtedly have demoralized and terrified those who were still fighting. In addition, the mere existence of such a gruesome trap would have fueled rumors and fear among enemy forces, further undermining their morale and effectiveness in combat. The scorpion bomb, used by the ancient Roman military, was another chilling example of a terrifying trap employed during warfare. This device consisted of a hollow earthenware container filled with live scorpions and fitted with a fuse. When the fuse was lit, the container would be hurled at enemy forces, shattering upon impact and releasing a swarm of angry, venomous scorpions. The scorpion bomb, a fearsome weapon employed by the ancient Roman military, capitalized on the natural threat posed by venomous scorpions. By packing live scorpions into a hollow earthenware container, Roman forces created a weapon that not only caused physical harm, but also sowed terror and panic among their enemies. Upon detonation, the scorpion bomb unleashed a torrent of agitated and venomous scorpions that would scurry and sting indiscriminately. The ensuing chaos disrupted enemy formations and sapped morale as soldiers scrambled to avoid the deadly creatures. The very notion of facing such a nightmarish weapon would have been a significant psychological burden for enemy forces, who would be constantly on edge, fearing the sudden appearance of scorpions on the battlefield. The scorpion bomb was designed not only to cause physical harm, but also to create panic and chaos among enemy troops. The sight of a horde of venomous scorpions suddenly unleashed on the battlefield would have been a deeply unsettling and terrifying experience, causing soldiers to scatter in fear and disarray. Moreover, the threat of being stung by one of these dangerous creatures would have added to the already considerable stress and anxiety experienced by soldiers in combat. The bamboo torture trap and the scorpion bomb serve as striking examples of the extreme lengths humans have gone to instill terror in their enemies. These methods, while undeniably effective in causing physical harm, were primarily designed to wield a psychological impact on enemy combatants, undermining their morale and combat effectiveness. The use of such brutal and inventive methods underscores the darker side of human ingenuity and the significant role that psychological warfare plays in armed conflict. Both the bamboo torture trap and the scorpion bomb highlight the lengths humans have gone to instill fear and terror in their enemies during times of war. These traps, while causing physical harm, were designed primarily to have a psychological impact on enemy combatants, undermining their morale and effectiveness in battle. The use of such brutal and inventive methods serves as a reminder of the darker side of human ingenuity and the power of psychological warfare in the theater of armed conflict.